March 18th is a big day for the Famicom. It's the day that the last major genre for the system breaks through. And I do mean break through. All three of the games released on March 18th can be described as strategy games, though I've chosen Nobunaga no Yabou because it's the one that has the most significant impact. And there's 2 more war games released in the next 2 weeks after that. We've seen a few strategy games before on the Famicom. We can stretch the definition to include shogi games, and Bokosuka Wars straddled the line between strategy game and RPG. But the games we're seeing now are the ones that most people would identify clearly as strategy games. And we're going to start with one of the most successful series of Japanese strategy games out there, Nobunaga no Yabou. Koei had been producing strategy games for computers for quite a while, but this was their first console port. It's also not really the first game in the Nobunaga no Yabou series. If we want to be really technical, it's a port of Nobunaga no Yabou Zenkokuban, or Nobunaga's Ambition National Edition. It's National Edition because the initial releases of Nobunaga no Yabou didn't include the entire map of Japan. So this Famicom game is actually the second game in the series. Koei's strategy games, especially at this time, followed a particular formula. You have a map divided up into regions. Each region has a ruler. The player steps into the shoes of one of those rulers, and they have to manage their kingdom, raise their armies, and make war on their neighbors until they've conquered all of the area. The battles take place on tactical maps where players have to maneuver units around. Nobunaga no Yabou takes place in the Sengoku period, a time when the emperor's control had grown weak, and every feudal lord who held a plot of land figured that they had a decent shot of controlling everything. There were decades of continuous civil wars, constantly shifting alliances, and it finally ended with all of Japan unified under a single ruler. So basically, an ideal setting for a strategy game. In fact, it's the most popular setting for a strategy game in Japan. The packaging for Nobunaga no Yabou is significantly different from what we've seen before. The box is a large plastic clamshell. The plastic box even has Koei's motto molded into it: Entertainment and Education. The manual is 80 pages long, features biographies of all 50 daimyos that are represented in the game, and it comes with a map of Japan showing how all of the regions interconnect. And the cartridge is something new. As a latecomer to the Famicom, Koei has to have their cartridges manufactured by Nintendo, and this is a new style of cartridge. It's molded to look very much like an NES cartridge. Koei uses this deluxe packaging for virtually all of their games. And coming from computer games, they're also the most expensive publisher on the Famicom. The average price for a Koei game is almost twice as high as the average price for any other publisher. Now we're finally getting to the game itself, and here's where we run into a problem. Koei games are enormous and complex, and as a result, you're going to spend the first 4 or 5 hours that you're playing with it just figuring out the basic systems. Now I'm not starting from square one, but I still have to make it over that initial hurdle. And the time I have available really just doesn't let me do that. So similar to RPGs, these heavy strategy games aren't a good genre for my format. That said, I was able to come to one very solid conclusion about Nobunaga no Yabou. The interface is terrible. It's inconsistent, doesn't take advantage of the nature of the platform, and is something that you have to overcome rather than use. It betrays its roots as a PC-88 computer game. There's no scrolling, you never interface directly with the maps, and it often requires that you input numbers to perform actions. It's the kind of thing that was acceptable as a computer game in 1983, but by 1988 it's totally outdated. When you turn the game on, your first selection is to start a new game or continue an old one. Nobunaga no Yabou has a battery backup, and it saves every turn. After that, you have to select if you want to play the 17-province map, which was the original game, or the full 50-province map of Japan. Then you choose if you want to watch the other battles that occur. The only reason you'd want to do that is if you're recording a video and want more battle footage that you're not involved with. Finally, you can select the number of players, anything from 0, where the computer just plays by itself, to 8. Now we hit the map screen, and you can flip between your views of Japan by pressing the B button. Here you're selecting your starting province and daimyo, and you have to do that by inputting the 2-digit number 1 digit at a time. Next up, you randomly roll your daimyo's stats. Their 5 stats are Constitution, Ambition, Luck, Charisma, and Intelligence. After you've rolled all your stats, it'll give you a total and ask you if you want to keep that character. So you can keep re-rolling until you've got a good total. I wouldn't settle for anything less than 450. Now we're into the game itself, and you'll watch as each turn plays out until it gets to yours, and then you have this enormous menu. Nobunaga no Yabou is a game that gives you a lot of tools to work with, and they're not necessarily all useful. You can do things to help the people out, like improve your town or build dams that improve agriculture, or you could recruit soldiers and train them, or hire ninjas to assassinate people, bribe them, arrange a marriage for an alliance. There's a lot going on here. The most important option, however, is to go to war. And when you do that, you have to select the number of the province that you're going to attack, decide if you're going to take part in the battle yourself, and then it goes to this tactical screen. There's actually 3 views of the battlefield, though it's really only 2 screens across. It starts by the attacker deploying their forces, and then you take turns moving. Each side moves all of their forces, and then the other side moves all of their forces. You don't get to choose what order to move forces in either. There's a set order for which the armies can move. Armies can't move into each other or merge, so you do need to consider that order when you're deploying. You don't want to get your troops stuck behind each other in a traffic jam. Moving and attacking are separate commands on the interface, though it won't let you select an invalid command. And instead of choosing what hex you want to go into, and yes, they're hexes even though they're drawn as squares, you have to choose from a menu what direction you want to go in. It's the kind of thing that only makes sense on an early computer. On the Famicom, it's just extra clunky. The way you win these battles is by taking out all of the opposing force, or by capturing the enemy daimyo. Of course, if your daimyo's taken out, it's game over. Nobunaga no Yabou is a historically significant game, but it's also one that I don't think is worth going back to, at least in this version. However, this exact game has been remade a dozen times, and the later versions have much better interfaces. Or, you could play the roughly dozen sequels to this game. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of Koei strategy games. I find them to be kind of fiddly and unintuitive, even by the standards of strategy games from the 80s. I can still say, however, that this version of Nobunaga no Yabou is just about the worst way to try it out. I don't see how anyone who isn't nostalgic for it could ever possibly get into it.